Okay. Hi, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to enter from the waiting room. So we'll start here in just a moment. Okay. Looks like everyone has joined from the waiting room. We're at 9:32, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us again for, I think maybe this is our 6th roundtable for industry partners. So we appreciate you being here. We've opened our grant program, so we know we have a lot to talk about today, and we're ready to take all of your questions and just open discussion. But before we do that, the CBO team is going to provide a few updates first, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So just a few reminders. We will please hold your questions until we provide all of our updates. And then at that time, you can raise your hand to speak. You can enter questions in the chat any way you would like. Again, we really want this to be an open discussion. The whole broadband office is on the call. So we're here to talk and answer questions. So we're going to get started. There was a big announcement made a couple weeks ago. I think at this point, things have gone very quickly, but we've learned our BEAD allocation, and Colorado is receiving $826.5 million from the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, NTIA program. So we are quite happy with that number. Actually a little on the higher end of what we were anticipating. So great news for the state. Great news for all of our stakeholders and our residents. We got a lot of attention around our announcement. We held a press conference with Senator Bennett and Governor Polis, Representative Titone and Representative Neguse. So in addition to Doug Kinkoff from the NTIA. So a lot of attention on Colorado, a lot of people who were there to celebrate with us. So we're really happy how all of it went. There was quite a bit of news coverage on Colorado's allocation. If you're interested in reading any of it, we have a CBO in the news on our website. The link is here. It's also on our main page of the website, but feel free to go and check out any of the news articles that were written around our BEAD allocation. At this time, I will hand it over to Mark. He's going to talk more about the BEAD program. So go ahead, Mark.
Hey, everyone. So happy to share a few next steps with BEAD. So you may recall the White House had a pretty big announcement on June 26th, but every state didn't receive our official letter until June 30th. So that starts a 180-day clock for our initial proposal. That's true for every state. Every state has a proposal due December 27th of this year. For us, we are kind of putting the final touches on the 5-year action plan. That date is based on when we got our award announcement, and we received ours on December 1st of last year. You have, I think, 270 days. So ours is due August 28th, and we'll be finishing that up and getting it submitted. And then we're moving on to our initial proposal. NTIA recently announced that they've sort of split the 19 parts of the initial proposal into a volume 1 and a volume 2. Volume 1 includes 4 parts, and they're all related to eligible locations and mapping. And then volume 2 is sort of the rest of it, the high cost threshold, labor, non-deployment uses, climate mitigation, and so on and so forth. So the volume 1, we have to, for both volume 1 and volume 2, we have to have a 30-day public comment period, and we welcome your feedback when we get those submitted. Once volume 1 has had the 30-day public comment period and we have incorporated that feedback, we have to get that submitted and approved by NTIA. And then we can finish off our volume 2, and then we have to submit that to NTIA, and that allows us to then conduct a challenge process. So as I mentioned, every state has the same deadline of December 27th. So I think our strategy is to get our volume 1 and volume 2 done in the fall ahead of other states. So that way we're not in the log jam behind every other state waiting for NTIA approval. They only have so much capacity to look at. There's 56 different states and territories that will submit a plan. So that's kind of where we're at on next steps for this project. You should expect to see a volume 1, in the next couple months, and a volume 2, after that time. And we're trying to get out in front of the very last day of the deadline of December 27th. And then our goal would be, conduct our challenge process in the first part of next year. And assuming that goes smoothly, we can then proceed on and open the BEAD grant program. The way BEAD will work is we need to conduct our entire grant program. We can do it in phases if we want, but we then have to submit a final proposal to NTIA that shows that we've got every unserved location of connection, every underserved location of connection, and then anchor institutions. So that's the kind of evidence. We have to run a grant process, then get approval from NTIA before we can then grant out money. Happy to answer any questions if you have. And I think Sarah Smith's on the line if I can answer it. So but we'll wait till the Q&A period to handle that. I'm going to pass it over to Michael Murphy, who's heading up our workforce effort.
Good morning, everyone. Just a little update and summary on the Colorado Broadband Office workforce plan. The comments, it's open for comments from stakeholders until August the 11th. If you did not receive the link or you're having issues with that link for the form, please let me know. And just as a reminder, we discussed this in our sessions. The goals for the workforce plan have been, we want to reach Coloradans and educate them on the broadband awareness, so that they know what broadband is. And by the end of 2025, we want to reach and have 3,000 workers entered into the training program, with a goal of 1,500 of those new workers employed in the broadband field by the end of 2026. And of course, there's 4 strategies that we feel are important to the workforce plan, and those include awareness programs. And this is anything from K through 12 to the workforce regional offices, educating those that come in and ask questions. We want to evaluate and scale training and job placement programs that are existing and or new ones that we have to create. And of course, if we have any that we want to create, then we're going to look at pilot programs and apprenticeships on how those can work together to fulfill the workforce plan. And then lastly, we want to embed this telecommunications section into our normal workforce infrastructure so that it's no longer a standalone or adjunct process. It is part of the normal workforce process that happens here in Colorado. So if you have any questions or you do not believe the link is working correctly, please let me know. And then a last reminder, the comments are due August the 11th. We will close the comments form on August the 11th at midnight. And if you have any questions on this, like Mark said, we will answer the questions after this. Now I will hand it over to Dahlia.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who has been hosting us during our CBO Roadshow. We have been having incredible meetings this past month, and we still have more meetings coming our way. So thank you once again for all of your support, and I hope that we have been answering all the questions that you had during those meetings. And just remember that we are going to be in Glenwood Springs on July 20th, Colorado Springs on July 21st, Loveland on the 26th, Pagosa Springs also on the 26th, Buena Vista and Limon in August. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass it to Brandy.
Great, thanks, Delia. So just a quick update on the CPF program. In the spirit of, obviously being open to feedback, we've received a couple of requests and comments about our application deadline. And I think when we opened up the program on June 20th, we had plenty of time. 2 months was a good target. I knew you guys would need a lot of time to fill out applications. But because of the issues with our data, I decided to extend the deadline another month to make sure that you guys have enough time to fill out applications with the most recent version of the map, and I promise we will not push out any more versions of the map because we don't want to change the goalpost for our stakeholders. And so recognizing that you guys needed to have good data from the beginning, obviously we just released our latest map. We're going to give you guys a little bit more time. So the new deadline is September 22nd. And so we want to make sure that you have the data, you have time with it. You can ask us any questions. I know some of you might have, that might have been your question today about data, because data is really important. So we anticipate being able to make up time in our process, given the extension. We'll do our best. We might have to push a few things because of it, but I'm optimistic that we can still keep the same schedule. The reason why this schedule is really important is because, as many of you guys know, we have federal deadlines around CPF. You know, we have to have these funds obligated and spent. And so, and we want to make sure that we get the money out the door. This is a program that's been highly anticipated for many, many, many months. And so the sooner we get the money out the door, the quicker you guys are going to be able to start your projects and get our stakeholders and our residents and our businesses covered. And so we also want to make sure that we don't run into next year with this program, because BEAD is going to be a huge lift for the broadband office. So we don't want to run these programs concurrently, if we can avoid it, of course. And so that's what's new on the application deadline. We will not be extending the September 22nd deadline. So this is kind of our our final, if you will. So just want to give you guys a little bit more time, and just with the data and filling out your applications and working with stakeholders. So if you have any questions on that, obviously we have a pretty good Q&A document on our website. You can also email anybody on our team to help answer any questions. So that's the latest on the CPF program, and I'll pause there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. At this time, we will open it up for Q&A. So again, raise your hand and we'll call on you. You can speak, or you can enter your questions into the chat. So we'll go ahead and take questions.
Hey, Lawrence, John Lee with Charter. I have a quick question on the community letters of support. Can we clarify that those, I believe in the guidelines, you use the term non-exclusive letters of support. Can we clarify that in the Q&A so counties know that, I mean, are they even allowed to go with a single solution or a single proposal? If somebody comes with and meets with the county with a legitimate proposal, are they obligated to provide that letter of support, or can they effectively pick winners and losers at that level of the process?
I can answer that question. For us, our our instructions were to have letters of support for our grant program. How counties deal with that and local government, we left it up to them. So we weren't prescriptive in, if for example, they had to have an exclusive letter with one ISP, or if they had to give everybody a fair shot at letters. We left that up to the jurisdictions. We didn't want to be prescriptive there, because we understand that Colorado is not a one size fits all type of approach when it comes to partnerships. And so we wanted those partnerships to happen organically. And so the only requirement that we have is that, you need to have letters of support in your application.
Thanks, Brandon.
Okay, we have a couple questions in the chat that I will read out loud for the team. Will you be allowing state agencies to apply for BEAD funding?
Yeah, so I can take that. So state agencies, we're going to come up with a separate process for state agencies as far as the BEAD funding goes. The application for state agencies will look pretty different from the ones that we have for external stakeholders. And if we have any state agencies on the call, I'm setting up internal meetings with stakeholders, working through your IT directors to figure out what we're going to do with BEAD. And that first meeting, I believe, is in a couple weeks. So I can always talk to our state agency partners offline if there's any additional questions.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. And if you have a follow-up, please feel free to raise your hand or enter it in the chat as well. Okay, the next question, what is meant by conducting a challenge process for BEAD? I'm assuming because that's where we talked about it. So Mark or Brandy, do either of you want to elaborate on that?
I'll let Mark answer that, or Sarah that's on the call.
Yeah, for the challenge process for BEAD, the NOFO sort of outlines it. If I remember correctly, there's a 14-day period to challenge, a 14-day period to respond, and then we have to publish the results for a minimum of 60 days. There's certain entities that can participate in that. They are, I think, ISPs, nonprofits, tribal governments. Individual residents are not allowed, if I got that correctly. Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong. And so the purpose of that is, the state will develop what we believe to be the eligible locations in the program, categorized by unserved and underserved. And then the process is to have stakeholders, tell us if we're wrong. And there's a couple of different modules in the challenge process that we can look at. And we may incorporate some of those into our initial proposal, volume 1. And again, that's available for 30 days for public comment. So, when we put that out, make sure you take a close look about how we're going to run that process so you can have input on whether or not we're doing it right. And then when we actually conduct the challenge process, that's when you have a limitation on who can participate. Sarah, what did I miss?
I'll just add that the three entities that can provide challenges and rebuttals in the challenge process are nonprofits, internet service providers, and local, regional, and tribal governments.
Okay.
Thank you. Mary, does that answer all of your question? Yes. Okay, great. Okay.
Hey,
I don't see
Lauren.
any other. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Sarah. Just to add some more clarification around state agencies applying for BEAD funding, they can apply to deploy last mile projects, but they cannot be an additional pass-through entity like the Colorado Broadband Office is. So they have to build and deploy internet services to be able to be eligible subgrantees.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for adding that. Okay, we have another one here in the chat. I'm going to read aloud. For BEAD funding, the NTIA NOFO requires a low-cost plan, 100/20, to be priced at $30 or less, and a low-cost option to remain available for useful life of network assets. How is the CBO planning to address? Will there be an allowable inflationary factor to permit increases, since useful life of fiber can be nearly 30 years? And that is posted in the chat. If anybody on our team needs to reread that, but let's see, Mark or Brandy or Sarah, can any of you address that?
I can start. Yeah, that's a really specific question and a really good one. We haven't started our planning yet. So again, a lot of this stuff will be included in our initial proposal that will spell it out. But I don't know, Sarah, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting off mute. It's an excellent question. It's an area within the NOFO that is not well defined because the NTIA cannot do any sort of rate setting requirements for states or ISPs. So it's an area that states are required to contemplate and come up with rules that fit within their constitution and their statute and work with subject matter experts to define. So the short and long of it is the NTIA doesn't give a lot of explanation, and the onus is on the state to define those types of things.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And again, Amanda, it looks like you posed that question, so feel free to ask a follow-up or reach out to our office as well if you need more information. But thank you. We're flagging all these questions as well too. So, okay, question in the chat, Sarah. This looks like this is directed to you. Can you provide further clarification on your statement about a state agency needing to provide internet services if they can apply for funding? Or maybe that was Brandy. I'm sorry, I can't remember who mentioned that.
I can approach it from the NTIA side, and
Okay.
Some of it will depend on, again, how the state chooses to manage the funds. But the requirements for eligible sub-grantees is that they are deploying and building broadband networks. So they, a state agency could come in as an individual sub-grantee or applicant to build and deploy broadband networks, or they could partner with an ISP or a nonprofit or a municipal broadband company or any of the other eligible sub-grantee types. But ultimately, they cannot be an additional pass-through entity, meaning that they cannot take the funding, apply for the funding, and then open their own grant application process to then pass funds down to another sub-grantee. The only pass-through entity that is allowable is the state of Colorado. They are the eligible sub-grantees of this funding from the NTIA. So coalitions and partnerships and pre-threes are totally encouraged. I can put the wording in the NOFO that sort of identifies what an eligible sub-grantee is, so that you can have that access. And then it is sort of up to the state of Colorado on how they choose to approach those types of partnerships, but they cannot exclude any of the eligible sub-grantee categories.
Thanks, Sarah, for that. And, Jennifer, I know you're with the Department of Corrections, so maybe we can set up a time to go over your specific questions regarding some of the projects that I know you would like to see funding for, so that we can figure out if it fits within the NOFO instructions. And I think if you can go on our website and look at the NOFO, because I think it kind of outlines what's eligible and what's not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question in the chat. It is, in the workbook, there are 2 drop downs for community letters of support, one from the local government entity and one that is a different kind. Can you clarify the difference in these 2 separate drop downs? Mark, can you maybe take that one? So clarification between the 2 types of letters of community letters of support in our grant program.
If someone from Tilson's on, they might be able to help, but I believe you can submit other kinds of support letters from other entities within the community. Yeah, Fred's got an answer here. One potential role for state agency. Oh, that's on beat. Fred,
sorry, that wasn't for that. I'll be happy to just mention that there's one required letter of support. The community letter of support, as described in the fairly prominently in the program guidelines. That is essentially an eligibility criteria that is required for the application to be fully reviewed. and ultimately be subject to an award. Additional letters of support from the community or any relevant letters of support for the project are also welcome. We realize that that's often something that applicants like to or can submit with their applications. They add a good deal of color and background, proper context to the application and the project. Those are optional, not scored, but the prominently displayed community letter of support in the guidelines document is a required element of the application.
Hey, thanks, Fred. And Elizabeth, that was your question. Just let us know if you have any additional questions around that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. It's a BEAD question. The question is the Build America, Buy America requirement. Will there be a waiver option for this? If the CBO begins rolling out BEAD grant awards, it is unlikely that the America is likely to have all the broadband components produced in America in the time needed, even to meet the 55% threshold. So it sounds like there's concern about the Build America, Buy America requirements and supplies actually being available. I know Allie Terry is not on the call today. She's on vacation. So I don't know if Mark or Brandy, if either of you were able to address that.
Last I had read, there's been no waiver. I think NTIA has contemplated it, but that's the last I had read. Is there no waiver? That's part of the law, so the state can't choose to ignore that part. Sarah, do you have an official answer or could provide any color on that?
Brandy, if you wanted to jump in first, I'm happy to let you go first and then add my piece.
Yeah, that's great, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, so just short answer, we have to follow the laws. So until the laws change, we don't really have an ability to look at waivers or make up our own laws around some of this stuff. So whatever federal law states and whatever the program guidelines state about Build America, we have to follow to make sure that the state's compliant. Because if we're not, we have to. Well, there's just no ability for us to not be compliant. So until we hear word that things have changed, the Build America is what we'll be following. So I understand people's concerns around that, but we do have to follow the regulations.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brandy and Mark. I'll just say, BABA was a pretty large piece of the bipartisan infrastructure law that got it passed. And I know that that the NTIA has heard a lot of feedback about this, and there will likely be guidance that will be coming out in the next couple of months regarding BABA to help support states in navigating this, along with, as I'm sure many of you are also concerned with, the letter of credit, which there will also be guidance coming out around this. Ultimately, this is something that is being discussed at the highest levels, like White House down. So the NTIA will have to take our guidance from our external affairs and intergovernmental affairs teams that are working with the White House. So long and short, have some patience with the NTIA as we navigate the bureaucracy of the federal government.
Yeah, I think the last we had heard that NTIA was kind of evaluating component by component, a piece of fiber, a piece of glass, maybe it doesn't have intelligence and you may be more willing to accept something like that from a foreign supplier. Whereas like the optical equipment or the brains of the network, there may be more security concerns around that and it might not be willing. So that's the last I had heard. And so we're waiting anxiously to see what you all come up with, Sarah.
Thanks, everybody. And I think BABA is my new favorite acronym. Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time in the chat, so we'll wait just a couple minutes for you to raise your hands or enter another question.
Hey, Lauren, one other note, we're working hard to get our next CPF FAQ out, and so we hope to publish it soon. Stay tuned for that. And if you have any additional questions you want us to address, please use the email address on your screen, the advance_CBO@state.co.us. so we can get those added. We've had quite a few folks on the road for different types of road shows, the CBO road show and the IIJA road show. So we're trying to get a pretty large batch of them put out relatively soon.
Thanks for that, Mark.
Hey, Lauren, this is Johnny. Just following up with Brandy. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the letter of support stuff. So in a proposed project where you might be involving the county, a couple of municipalities, maybe a few incorporated areas as well, you're going to have multiple governmental entities that are going to have to provide a letter of support. And if one of them chooses not to, then they effectively torpedo the entire project plan, don't they?
Yeah, so so communities can, provide letters of support to as many or as little partners as possible. And so again, we're not really dictating what counties and local governments should do about their letters of support for grants. I will tell you that it's not uncommon for local governments to provide letters of support for grants that are being made to the state or the federal government. It's not uncommon. Matter of fact, it's common. And one of the things about these federal programs is there is a requirement for community engagement. And so whereas we like to see letters of support for different grant programs the state has. For these programs, it's the engagement piece is required for the partnerships between public and private sector. If a community decides not to provide a letter of support, that's their prerogative, and I think we'll look at that. But I don't necessarily think it's what you referred to as torpedoing a project. I think, we encourage the letters of support and it's required for our program. So, we just didn't want to be prescriptive in what local governments can do or not do as far as who they support in their community for applications. And so I know that's probably a non-answer to your question, but, it's really up to the local government. I mean, just short answer, it's up to the local government who they provide support for, but I encourage you to get those letters of support for your grant applications. Because one thing that the reason why they're so important is, it's a requirement of the program. It's absolutely a requirement of our program. So, the federal government wants us to engage. They want to see community engagement. And so we don't really, and we think that, having engagement on these projects makes for really good projects. And so, hopefully you can get some letters of support for your projects if you're interested in applying, but it's something that we're going to be looking at because it's a requirement.
Thank you.
Hey, Lauren, this is Brian with Visionary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, quick question. Well, a couple of ones. I think just to follow up on John's question, though, if in his example, there are 3 jurisdictions, you get letters of support from 2 jurisdictions and 1 jurisdiction does not issue a letter of support, does that eliminate the project in the scoring criteria?
No, it doesn't, not necessarily.
Okay,
So,
okay, cool. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just
I
wanted to
mean, some
verify
local governments won't provide any letters of support to be neutral.
that. Yeah,
So that's absolutely a scenario that plays out in the field. And so we'll probably have to verify some of that if that's the case.
Okay,
So, we understand that everybody's different. So.
and then one more quick kind of logistical question. On the spreadsheet where you put all the addresses in the workbook, it's locked. And so you can copy and paste in a bunch of the data, but there's one like little drop down that you can't copy and paste. So if you've got a project with 800 addresses, you have to go in 800 times and select that drop down box. Is there any way to avoid that?
Fred, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I actually tested that personally. Went into the online portal as an applicant, downloaded the workbook. There is on the locations tab, there is an enabling editing button. at the top of the
Okay.
screen that needs to be pressed, right? That's not locked. So you just have to press enable editing. It's just an Excel thing. After that, it's fully functional. I tested it by downloading one of the CSV files from the library tab, associated with the geodatabase, and copied and pasted a large chunk of those of that data into the workbook. So if you can try that, please, using the enable editing button. And if any problems persist on your part, let us know and we'll figure out a solution.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Okay. Thanks for your questions, everybody. We've got about 20 more minutes, so plenty of time to answer more questions, but we'll give it a couple minutes. See if any others come across. Okay. Actually, John, you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, I'm good, Lauren. Thanks.
Okay. Just to make sure I didn't end before you had a question. Okay. Well, it looks like that's it for all of our questions today. If you want to, please send additional questions to that email there on the screen. We monitor that daily, and as a matter of fact, we take those and we incorporate them into all of our FAQ versions. So every single question that comes to our office is answered and posted in our FAQ document. And then reminder, we have a wonderful programs team that is dedicated to the grant program, and Ali and Mike are actually dedicated to different regions across the state. So here's their information. Feel free to reach out directly to them as well. And then join us for our next industry roundtable, which is September 19th. So again, these are every other month. And then there's plenty of other ways to receive updates. I'm pretty confident at this point, everyone on this call knows how to receive updates from us because you're all very engaged. So, but just in case, there it is again. And we will send out the slide recordings as well as the slide deck and answers to any questions that came up today. So thank you everybody for attending, and we'll talk to you next time.